Alright guys, welcome to the channel. You may ask yourself, what the hell am I looking at? Well, what you're looking at is the beginnings of a budget PC build that we're going to use Xeon processors and an H55 board and an RX 480 video card, and we're going to get some amazing gameplay out of this. Like I said, this is just a budget build and it's going to be strictly used for Fortnite only. So some things to consider on budget builds is, what do you have to work with? Well, obviously you see that I have a computer case that I am going to work with. It's bad shape. I've had it for a very long time. I've stripped it from everything that it's had in it. Once upon a time, this was an i5 system, and the board went bad, and I just hung on to the case. I don't have a side panel for it on this side, and that's fine, because I'm going to put a clear glass side case on it. Side panel, if you will. But let me show you this case real quick. It's you know, it's had stuff spilled on it. It's pretty old, but it's got all the goodies and whatnot. But what I'm going to do with this case is I am going to wet sand it and implement my paint scheme on it. I'm not going to tell you what that is just yet. Then we're going to put a nice clear coat on it. Then once that's done, we can get into the build, the actual build of this PC. I'm going to code name this PC the Llama. And you'll see why when you see the paint scheme at the end. But it's something new for the channel. There seems to be a lot of interest in budget PC game builds. You know, me myself, I've watched hundreds of videos on it. I'm not going to tell you the total that I have in this system yet, because I did splurge a little bit on some stuff extra that it does not need. But I want to make myself a nice budget gaming rig with a little bit of bling. You can skip the bling and get a basic gaming system. And it'll perform well if you're diligent on YouTube and watch auctions and take your time and buy the stuff that you need to complete your system. But with that being said, I'm going to start wet sanding on this thing. It needs a good wash. As you can see, there's a lot of dirt, crap, and debris where it's sat around for a long time. Then once I get this thing wet sanded and possibly the first coat of paint on it, I'll lay out my components and we'll show you what I'm putting into this thing. And I'll try to explain some of the prices on it. But I hope you enjoyed this video. This is going to be a lot of fun for me to build, and you'll actually get to see me build this when I get ready to put it together. You'll get to see me implement the processors and blah 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 and all that good stuff. But anyway guys, that's it. Enjoy the video. As you can see, I've done some wet sanding. Now our case looks really horrible. It's wet. Try to keep everything dry as possible. That's why I put that on there. It's aluminum foil. But as you can see, she is sanded. Looks a little bit better than it did. At least we'll get a good finish on it. Now, when this case dries, which may be a while, I'll get started on that. But the next thing you guys will see is the components that I'm going to put into this. The basic components for the budget system. Then I'll show you what I'm going to add to it. You can build this the same way that I'm building it. You can build it any way you want to. But in essence, it's a true budget build because we're using all used parts. Everything that I'm using is used. I want to stress that there's nothing new that I'm using except for the cooling fans. That's the only thing that's new. But anyways, I'm going to jump on to the next stage and lay out the components and show you what we got and briefly go through that. I took the case outside, wet sanded it, and it wasn't too difficult to do. It was just a bit of a pain in the ass because it's kind of cold outside, but I've got the first coat of paint on it, and it's looking really well. Now what you're looking at is the components that I'm going to put into this system. I've had computers all my life, and parts best I can. I've had stuff gave to me, and you know, it adds up over time, and some of this stuff I had to buy on eBay. Like I said, this is going to be a budget build, and we're using the Xeon processors, as you can see here. That's a 3420, a 3440, and the 3450 Xeon processors. They're cheap. This one was $7. I think this one was $8, and the 3450 was maybe $10. And they can be overclocked to really great speeds, because right now the speeds aren't all that great on them. So now let's go to this SSD drive. This SSD drive I've had for a while. I bought it off a buddy of mine. It was brand new, and this was a 240 gig SSD, and I think I paid $15 for this, and they're not very expensive anyway. On Amazon you can get them for about $30. And here is our DDR3. I have nothing as far as cost in this memory, because my nephew gave me a system that had an i5 in it, and this was the memory that was in it. So this is what I'm going to use for this build. There's two 4 gig sticks. Power supply. This power supply is a cheap Chinese made power supply. You can get these on eBay for, I don't know, I think it was $26 or something like that. It wasn't very expensive. And you know, they're okay in the short term, but I wouldn't leave my computer on with, you know, if I'm not at home, to keep an eye on it, because you never know what could happen. You know, it could short out and burn your house down. But now the motherboard. The motherboard I got on an eBay auction. It's an MSI. It's a H55M-E33. It's a pretty good motherboard. I think I got this in auction for $37, I believe it was, free shipping. So it wasn't bad. That's going to be the hardware system. And you can see I have a GameMax cooler. This is one of the big air coolers. You want something big for overclocking your CPUs, because the heat, the stock coolers just will not cut it. It just invest. I think this thing was on Amazon. It was $21 maybe $18. I can't remember exactly. And the hard installer of our system, as you can see down here, is this MSI Armor Radeon RX 484 gig card. Now this card looks brand new. It looks like it's never been took out of the box, or used for that fact. It's got the CD with it, the manual and everything. A video card can be quite expensive. That's something that you're going to have to wait and watch, wait and wait and wait. You'll eventually find a good listing. Since this is going to be strictly a Fortnite computer, we don't need nothing real fancy to run Fortnite, and we should get some pretty good frame rates out of this. And this card cost me $51, which I thought was a steal. Even though these cards have been out for a while, they're still plenty good to do what I want to do with it. So if you're going to put together a budget system, take your time, look around for parts. You'll find them eventually. Don't be in no rush, especially if you're tight on money. And like I said, the case, it was free. It's the one I got off my nephew that had the i5 in it, so I don't have any money in that one. But I do have some extra things that I'm going to add to that case, which obviously you saw that it didn't have fans, so I had to buy fans. You can buy a 3-pack of fans for like $8. You can get some cheap ones, and they'll work just fine. But I went a little overboard with it. Like I said, I'm going to do some bling on this case, and it's going to look really good. And it's just something that I enjoy doing. I like doing this kind of stuff, and I like to show you guys, you know, what you can do with what you have. But basic components right here. If you had a case with fans, you could put this together into your system, overclock your Xeon or whatever you're overclocking, and you'll have a phenomenal gaming computer dedicated for Fortnite, if that's what you want to do. And plus you can do other applications with it, like video edit or whatever. But it will get you into gaming, you know, for a little bit of money, not a whole lot of money. My prime gaming rig, it's a Ryzen 7 system. Obviously I have quite a bit of money in that one. And I don't want to overclock that CPU, but I want to get into overclocking. And that's why I went with these Xeons, because they're cheap. And apparently you can see the cat is over there trying to help me out or make a mess. She likes to try to hide under things. She's really curious. But anyway, guys, I'm going to work on this case, finish my paint scheme, and when I get ready to put all this together before it goes into the case, you'll see that too. So that'll probably be next. And here we go. Alright guys, the moment we've been waiting for. We've got our case where we want it. The case is done. I'm not going to show you that just yet. I'll show you that in a little while when we go to set the board into our case. So right now we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our CPU on. We're going to put our RAM in, and we're going to put our CPU cooler on. I find it's much easier to do this outside the case because you have access to everything that you need. So let's go right on and do this. The processor I'm using today is the X3450. Like I said, these are like 10 bucks on Amazon. Not Amazon, but eBay. Really cheap. I also had the 2 other variants in this. And these are the Xeons. They're overclockable. We should get really good performance on a budget build. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's just go ahead and go. But first, before I do, you may not be able to see that. You see the arrow here? That shows you where this goes on the board. The board is also marked so that you can line everything up and you don't have any issues. So let's go. I know this board has a white dot right here. The CPU has an arrow. So I know that this sets in just like that. And I always just wiggle it ever so slightly, just move it around just gently to make sure it's seated. So then we're going to clamp her down. Just like so. So now we need to apply a little thermal paste. A little goes a long ways, guys. You know, a lot of people do this different ways. I have my ways done it. You may have your way of doing it. But basically what we want is just a nice thin coat. And I always just use my finger. And I just aiming for a nice thin layer on top of my CPU. And this is really good thermal paste. This is MX4 thermal compound. I got it on Amazon. I use it, and sometimes I'll use Arctic Silver. Arctic Silver works really great too. Make sure it's as nice as level as can be. Smooth. And just like that, guys, we have thermal paste on. I don't know if you can see for this lighting. This lighting is kind of weird. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our RAM sticks in. Get this out of the way. Now I know on this board, this is 1 and 3, 2 and 4. So we're going into the 1 and 3 slots. Dual channel. Make sure everything's lined up. Give it a good push till she clicks. We got our other RAM stick. And do the same thing. Open her up a little bit. If you're like me and have really bad eyesight, sometimes it's hard to hit these slots. Give it a nice push. Now we're going to move on to our CPU cooler. I've got a Game Max tall cooler because I'm going to overclock this CPU, and we're going to need extra cooling. And on this board you can see that I have holes, and that's for the bracket that holds this to go into. So let me get that and we'll proceed on. Okay, now I have to take this thing out of the box. It's not out of the box yet. You can see this is what we're using. Okay, now let me show you this thing. This is a behemoth. You can see it's 6 pipes. This sort of cool our CPU good. Since we're overclocking, we're going to need something that big. Check that out. This is also RGB rings or something on it. I have no idea. Not quite sure if I want to use that or not, but I will. But first, we need to get our mounting bracket. And this is what our mounting bracket looks like. Pretty simple, self-explanatory. See, let's do something like that. So, what we need to do is line these plastic pieces up with our board. And just give them a push till they snap in. Just like that. Okay, so that's... So now, we take these pieces and we'll just push them down in here like this. I'm going to get them all seated first before I go to pushing on anything. And this just helps lock everything together. Just give them a good push. And it just spreads your plastic out underneath and makes everything tight. So, because we don't want this thing pulling up when we put our cooler on. Okay. Okay, this shouldn't be too difficult. These go on fairly easily. So we're going to hook this side first. And just like that, she is locked down. And there we go. Plenty of cabling. You can see we got our board header. This is for our LEDs, and this is for our CPU fan on our board. And this one is over here. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in just so I don't forget to do that later. Okay, now we have all that plugged in. This is for our RGB lighting. So the next step, the next thing we want to do is we want to get this into our case. Alright guys, there's the case. As I told you before, I wet sanded it and put one color, and I didn't really get into detail on any of the colors that I was going to use, but I named it the Llama. And the reason I named it the Llama is because I used the Fortnite Llama colors in my splatter. I think the case turned out very, very well for what it is. Super simple, easy to do, good way to bring life to an old case. And once I get my bling inside this case, it should look pretty epic. This thing is going to look phenomenal when it's done. And it's clear coated, it's done, it's ready to go. So now I need to take this aluminum foil off my cables. The reason I've done that is because I didn't want paint all over my cables. I've seen people paint cases and they don't do much for their cables, and when they get done painting it, their cables look like crap. You can see mine are nice and clean. Aluminum foil is cheap, so why not? It's all about neatness. If your system looks good, people are going to comment on it, and it's just, you know, it's just going to look good on you that you took the time and built something this way. So I'm going to lay this down, change this camera angle, and we're going to put in this board. Okay, the next step we need to do is we need to put in our I/O shield. Luckily I watched an auction and got a board that actually came with a shield, so it just makes your case look better, lets your build look more clean. You don't necessarily have to have it. I've had systems in the past where I didn't have it, you know, everything's fine. It's just more cosmetic than anything. So now we're going to set our board in. As you can see, we already have our standoffs on this board, and I've checked them and they are in the right places. So I'm going to gently grab this by the cooler and lower it into place. Okay, looks good. Now we can put our screws in. Now what I like to do is I like to start with the easy ones first. And as I can see down here at the bottom, I've got a real easy one to get to. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. Would help if I found the right size screw. I've got so many screws here that it's almost difficult to find the right one. This should be it right here. Organization is key, people. You can see I'm not very organized when it comes to this kind of stuff because my parts are scattered everywhere. Okay, so that went much better. You want it snug, you don't want it super tight because you could break your board if you try to put this thing with killer pressure like your Popeye and you just ate spinach or something like that. But, so we're going to go to the corner. Like I said, I like to get a couple started just to hold everything in place until I can see what I'm doing. Try to get one back here in the corner. But let me get this done, guys, and I'll be right back and we'll move to the next step. Okay, now that I have all my screws in, we can go ahead and put this GPU in. This is a 2-slot GPU. It takes 2 slots in our case in the back. Let me turn this to where I can see what I'm doing here, to make sure everything seats, everything is lined up. And it looks like our GPU is seated. Okay, now I'm going to put a screw in that, and that's going to hold our GPU into place so it doesn't move around. Then we'll move on to the next phase. Okay, now that we have everything in that we need in, we need to put our power supply in. Power supplies are pretty simple, straightforward. This one on the bottom. Make sure your fan isn't blocked off by anything, because if it does, your power supply will overheat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm going to go ahead and finish routing the cables and trying to get the power button hooked up and get some of these fans in here, because that kind of stuff is boring. This whole video will just be dull and boring. Anybody that builds computers knows how to pretty much put fans in and power supplies and cable management. But anyway, I'm going to stop right here and get this thing finished.